The next thing I'm going to do is take a little bit of a step back and just start to go over some basic ideas of programming. And these ideas are applied to any programming language, including Python. And then we'll go over specific implementations and syntax of how to do these things in Python. So any computer programming language, including Python, is based on 5 basic elements, which is how you start to structure your code. The first element is variables, and variables work just like in math and functions. They're containers which store information or data within your program. So you can use variables to store a piece of data and then work with that data in the future. So the way this works in Python is you can declare a variable by using the equal syntax. So here A is the name of my variable, it can be anything. I'll say A is equal to 15. So now within this session of Python, A will always be 15. So I can say A, again I can just print A, it's the same thing. And then if I assign another variable, say B is 10, so B is 10 now. And if I say A plus B, it'll give me the solution to that. Within any programming languages, there's many different types of variables. There's number variables, so we can have integers, which are whole numbers. We have floats, which are decimal numbers. The other kind of variable is a Boolean. So Boolean is basically a true, false, or a binary, and this is how you can store conditional information, say whether something is true or false at any given point. The other way, the other variable type is string. So a string is basically text, any text information, and a string is basically a collection of character objects. So there's also characters, and a character is just a letter or a number. So those are the basic type of variables you use, and use different variables depending on what kind of information you want to store. If you want to store a number, a condition, or text. And the great thing about Python is when you declare a variable, like I did here, you don't actually have to specify what kind of variable you'll be using. Other languages you have to know in advance, but in Python you don't. Python will basically, depending on what you pass it, will automatically assign a variable type. So that's what makes Python really easy to start using. But you should remember which kind of variable you're using just when you start to use those variables together. So for instance, if I set A to 10, and I can type in the type of A, and it'll tell me it's an integer. And if I set B to say Bob, and I ask Python for the type of B, it'll give it a string. And now if I was to start adding A plus B, because you can't add a number to a string, it will basically give me an error. So you should keep in mind which type of variables you're using. So here it's saying there's no supported operation for the plus sign to combine integer and a string. And Python is pretty flexible also. It has what's called overloaded operations. So the plus sign can mean different things depending on what variables you're using. So if I say A equals 10 and B equals 15, I can do A plus B, and that works like arithmetic, addition. Or if I say A equals Bob and B equals Smith, I can say A plus B, and it'll give me the concatenation of those strings. So again, there's a lot of flexibility, but you should keep in mind which type of variable you're using when you start to use them. So as we've already seen, Python supports your basic operands, arithmetic operations, which can take different forms depending on what kind of variables you're using. So just to go through some of the operands that Python supports, there's addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. So these work just like basic arithmetic. There's also exponentials, so to raise something to the power of something else. The other type of structures that Python supports are conditionals. So this is the way that you test certain variables against each other, and these work just like in basic logic. So there's greater than or equal, less than, and less than or equal. There's also equality. So the equals character in Python is used as assignment. So here you're saying A is equal to 10. You're basically assigning 10 to A. If you want to check for equality, so you want to check if two things are equal, you use double equals. And in addition to that, there's the not equal, which works just like equality, but in reverse. So just to show you how some of these things work in Python, again, we had A equals 10, B equals 15. So now we can say A is smaller than B, and what this will return to us is a Boolean. So it'll tell us basically whether something is true or false. If we assign C to the condition of A is smaller than B, C is now stored as true, and if we check the type of C, it's going to be the Boolean. And we can do the same thing, say A is not equal to B, that will be true. Next, you can also combine logicals using the and or notation. So if you do and, it's logical and or, logical or. So this, you can combine different logical operations. So you can say A, you have A equals 10, B equals 15, C equals 20. If you say A is smaller than B or C is smaller than B, it'll give true. Even though this one is false, if either of these are true, it'll return true. We can also use and. So basically, A is smaller than B and C is smaller than B, it'll give us a false. So for this to return a true, both of these statements have to be true. That's the basic structure of how you declare variables and then do operations on those variables. The last thing I'll talk about in the basic variables category are special data structures. So these are data structures that can help you accomplish certain things in Python. So the most basic kind of variable is just one variable. So here we're declaring A is 10 and A is just one thing, it's just 10. In some cases you want the ability to store multiple values with a variable, and in that case we'll use a more complex data structure. And there's two types in Python. There's basically an array, or sometimes called a list, and there's a dictionary. So I'll show you how both these data structures work, but they're both pretty much ways of storing multiple values behind any variable. So the way this works is if you want to use an array, you can use any variable. So again, we'll use A, and in this case we use the bracket notation to store multiple values. So now instead of A being one value, A can be multiple values, and we put them into these brackets, and we put the values separated by commas. So here we say A is equal to 1, 2, and 3. If we want a specific value within that array, we can just call it up by index, and for that we use again the bracket notation. So we say A, and the part of A we want is the first value. So here, as with most programming languages, the indexing of values within lists or arrays starts with 0. So the first element of A is 0. The second element is 1. Now if we ask for a place that doesn't exist, so if we ask for, say, the fourth value within that array, it'll give us an error basically saying the index is out of range. We can also do things like ask Python how long a list is, and since the length is 3, we can always index the last value of an array by saying A, and we want the value, and we say whatever the length of A is minus 1. So this will always give you the last position. Okay, and another way, the easier way to do this is by saying A -1. So -1 will always go to the last value in the array. And like I said before, the name of the variable can be anything. So here we can say R, and the things you put inside it can also be different types of variables. So here we can make an array of basically strings. If we ask for the type, it'll give us the type list. So the cool thing about Python is actually, unlike a lot of languages, you can combine multiple types of variables within a single array, and a lot of languages won't allow this, but again, because Python is so flexible, it'll account for this in its data structures. So you can actually do something like have an array that has a string and then an integer, and it'll store it, and then you can ask for any of these, and even if you ask for the type of the object in the index 1 of the array, it'll tell you it's an integer. Whereas if you ask for the first one, it's a string. So you can actually store multiple types of variables within a single array. So that's an array. The other type of data structure is a dictionary. And this is similar to an array, but instead of just listing menu values in order and then accessing them by their position in that list, you're able to assign every data object with what's called a key. So every value will have a key by which you call it. So I'll show you how this works. So if we have a dictionary, and instead of the square bracket notation for arrays, we use the curly brace notation. And within the curly brace, you have the structure where first you'll provide a key. So the key is a colon, and then the data that key references to. So this is one entry into a dictionary, and we can have multiple entries with the same notation as with arrays with the comma. So we have comma, a new key, b, and that b relates to a new value, and c relates to another value. So now my dictionary, it will return this dictionary. If we ask for its type, it's a dictionary. And to access the information within the dictionary, it's similar to arrays. You basically use the square bracket notation, but instead of providing an index within it, you provide the key. So if I want to ask what is the value of the entry that's keyed to A, it'll do 5. And if I ask it for the entry that's tied to B, it'll give me that. And what I can't do now is I can't actually access things by index. So if I ask it for the first location, it won't do that. It'll basically give you a key error, because dictionaries work only by referencing the keys. So which one of these you use depends on your application, and they're both useful for different kinds of things.